All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And if more people join, I might pause and admit them in because apparently for some people I have to admit, and then for others I don't. Interesting system. Um, anyway, hi everyone, welcome to Quick Tips. Just so you all know, this program exists thanks to the American Heritage Center, the Wyoming State Archives, and the Wyoming State Historic Records Advisory Board. This program is funded by grants made available through the Wyoming SHRAP Board and by the National Historic Publications and Records Commission, which are administered by the Wyoming State Archives, which is part of the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources. Today, we're going to be talking about boxes. So I titled this one Anything But a Box. And by box, I do refer to the Hollinger box. So we're talking about Hollinger box alternatives, meaning we're mostly focusing on paper and photographic materials for this presentation. But we can talk about more specific object curation towards the end. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions, but please know that I will address all questions at the end of the presentation, where we'll have like a little discussion forum and the formal Q&A. So with that being said, what are we talking about today? So we're going to talk about the gold standard, really highlighting like why Hollinger boxes are usually the go-tos, but also understanding that they're not always the most financially accessible and easiest to get, especially here in Wyoming. So we'll talk about shopping tips and tests that we should be aware of when looking at these supplies. And then really just establishing the overall goal when we look at storage of archival materials. And then I have 4 alternatives for you guys to utilize or to think about when making selections about, hey, how am I going to store this to preserve it? And then we'll get into the discussion and Q&A portion. So with that, why do we use Hollinger boxes, right? Well, Hollinger boxes were created in 1945 by William Hollinger as a collaboration with the Library of Congress and National Archives. That's where we get the term Hollinger box from. It is named after him. And the goal of a Hollinger box was to just set a standard for the preservation of historical documents and photographs. Now, when they were created, most people refer to these document boxes, which can be legal or letter size, depending on the sheet of paper. And they have a couple of key features, but Hollinger has also kind of been associated with just archival in general. And so for some people, they can refer to not only these document boxes, but clamshell boxes and these other storage boxes, all of which have are purchased through archival supply stores like Hollinger, Metal Edge, and Gaylord Archival, University Products, all of these places where we go to look for supplies, right? So when I refer to Hollinger boxes, I am referring to any type of archival grade box, even though archival is not technically a term that is standard with these boxes. So when we go shopping for these materials that we're caring for, what makes Hollinger stand out against the rest? Well, I've kind of devised it into 3 different categories. You have the chemistry. So anytime you're looking for anything that will store archival materials, we always want to look for that acid-free, lignin-free, and most of the time they are buffered materials. We can get more specific with that because with anything with color, so those photographs, we usually want to refer to unbuffered materials. But that's at more of the folder level. We usually trust whatever's physically holding that within the container to preserve that. The boxes themselves are usually pH neutral and will allow some breathability for materials which will off gas just because of their inherent makeup. Something else that Hollinger also has in place are their actual structures. So if you look at a Hollinger box, most of the time it does not have glue or tape in the actual building of the material. It's usually made with a 60-point board, and it's held together with metal stays on the tips. I actually have some Hollinger boxes right next to me. This is one of our half Hollinger boxes, but they have these metal edges which hold the box together. These can be removed just depending on how you utilize your box. I know some of our archivists here at the Wyoming State Archives, for ease of accessibility, will remove the metal so that way when the box is flat, it's easier to pull individual materials out. But this metal usually doesn't eat away at the board as quickly as other metals do. And then the design of the box itself helps keep out light, helps keep out dust, and allows those materials to breathe, like I mentioned before. And so with the Hollinger boxes, we try to preserve materials for as long as possible, as best as possible, right? They most of the time are also pat tested. So when they are keeping out the light and the dust, most of these boxes which hold especially photographic material are tested to see what chemical reactions between photographs and the materials of the box interact over time. The test actually incubates materials at a high temperature and high humidity accelerated aging environment, which then tells those testing it if the box can hold up to what is needed and will not necessarily impact the materials within the box. So it's been found that materials that pass this PAT test pose minimal risks of causing harm to photographic materials, and therefore also paper materials within the boxes. And like I mentioned before, the goal is to ultimately preserve materials as best as possible for as long as possible. Most archives, museums, cultural institutions are trying to preserve the past, and so that way we can refer to it in the future. And then there are always going to be some issues that come into play when we're trying to preserve these, whether that be funding, supply back orders, getting large donations and then realizing, hey, I don't necessarily have the space for all of this, right? So when we're confronted with these issues, we sometimes have to pivot our practice in order to not only stay within budget and preserve the materials, which are two juggling acts to begin with, but to then also make sure that we are making these materials accessible, right? So with that, I have our first alternative. We see a lot of these in office settings, but metal cabinets can be used when storing or especially documents and photographs. Here at the Wyoming State Archives, many of our photograph collections are stored in these cabinets pictured here. The pros of using metal cabinets are fairly straightforward. They are most often closed off and limit light damage and dust interaction. They are structurally rigid and made of inert materials, meaning most of the metals aren't going to off-gas as much as other materials, as much as like wood shelving and plastics off-gas. So that's not going to inherently mess with your materials, but because they are so rigid and structured, they do create little climates. So if you're referring to these metal cabinets, something to be aware of is like if any moisture gets locked in it. So we're always checking that temperature and humidity range, because you want to be checking in on your materials every so often anyway, to make sure that we're not seeing any active mold cases, which need to be quarantined and set aside, so that way they can be treated or prevented from further damage. And then with these microclimates, you want to make sure that it's not spreading to the whole cabinet, because then it would spread to the materials within the cabinet. The expense is more so on the folders or on buffered tissue paper, which, as I mentioned before, is that active holding of the materials, as opposed to boxes. That does pose some financial shifting. But most of the time when you're ordering boxes, you're also ordering those materials anyway to then preserve your materials, the historical records and objects within these boxes and folders. So it's not a super shift, but like as you can see in this photo, there are some hanging files inside of those hanging files because it keeps all of the materials on the edge. Susie talked about how photographs should be stored on their edge in our previous quick tips. Please feel free to go watch that video, which I can share the link at the end if people are interested. So when you keep these materials on the edge, you're still saving space, and you're still maintaining their shape, as long as you also recognize that the hanging folder itself might be more acidic. So then you can put the tissue paper or the folder within that hanging holder to then preserve and keep the pH more neutralized. So that way it's then not eating away at your photographs or documents or those materials. And then, as with any technology, the mechanical parts of the metal containers can cause access issues or accidental damage, in that, like, if a drawer gets stuck, or these cabinets in particular, if you have an open drawer, you cannot access a secondary drawer. And that can limit how much you access your materials. It should also be noted that you don't want to use these cabinets that have the rubber wheels, because with temperature and humidity and just time, those rubber wheels will start to melt and can contaminate your objects and cause damage to those materials. So being aware of what to look for when you're using these metal cabinets is super pivotal. But if it means that you are able to save on space and time, these are a viable option for storing materials. You just should be aware of these things, so that way you can always go back and create, similar to any sort of management, you want to create workflows and systems, so that way you're continually checking the materials to make sure nothing is amiss. Awesome. Oh, before I move on, it is also recommended that you use these lateral cases, so that way they pull out not as far into the walkway and still are maintained easily. Because when you use the deeper single drawers, they can pull out into your walk space, and then it's harder to access materials at the back. These lateral ones keep things contained and easily accessible. You also don't necessarily want to stack individual units on top of each other. But because you can find a lot of these materials for relatively the cabinets themselves, if they're used, you can find them for relatively cheaper than purchasing new storage, or like I said, in many office spaces, they've already exist. So my recommendation there is use what you can, but be aware of the pros and cons of that. So that's option number one, are the metal cabinets. Option number two, we don't necessarily love these, but the plastic tubs. I know personally, I find these really useful to my records at home and any of my, I put a lot of my Christmas decorations in these plastic tubs, right? Because of their waterproof / resistant nature, they are almost a natural barrier to pests most of the time, as long as there's no cracks or anything in them. They're easy to inventory and they're stackable, which that makes them useful for most days. And often what I've seen is these types of boxes get brought in as donation materials. So now they're in your collections room and they're here to be inventoried and used. But let's say you get a rather large donation that you don't have all of the boxes for yet. You can use these for time. The cons of these are similar to the metal ones. They do create these microclimates, especially in these plastic containers. They are prone to locking in any moisture, which can then turn into a hazard for your materials in that they create mold or cause some minor or some water damage to the materials that are housed within them. So when you're using these, make sure that there is no traces of any water. Like I would even wipe them down with a dry paper towel beforehand. They can also form static electricity just because you are using plastic. And so it can cause some static to form there. Clear cases like this one, while they are easy to inventory and it's very easy to see what's stored inside of them, it does pose a potential light damage. So you will, if you're utilizing these, try to keep these in as dark as cases as possible. And then because they are made with plastic, there is off-gassing. They are not acid-free, they are not lignin-free. They do pose that long time storage issue of off-gassing to those materials and can damage them that way. And then most of the time, these tubs are not standardized to the types of shelving we use, which does pose another issue in terms of space. So while these can be used, I highly recommend that these are more short-term solutions and used for the storage of materials until you can transition into something else. So number two is plastic tubs. Alternatively, you always have the option to create your own DIY archival boxes using archival cardstock. I can send videos to those who are interested. I found several that I am going to post through the WRAP website. But basically what you do is you take this 60-point archival cardstock board, and then you fashion the board to the materials inside. So these are pretty economical. A single set of 25 sheets costs about $3.20 per sheet, whereas archival boxes can cost anywhere from $12+ for one box to I have seen upwards of like 12 to 25 is usually what I've seen. These can save on shelf space because most of the time you can format the box to the materials. And like I said, they're customized. So keeping that, and they naturally come unbuffered and acid-free. Now, if you are bad with origami like I am, the structure of these cardstock boxes will inevitably fail, and like over time though. I know that sometimes when I fold things a certain way, especially when working with the cardstock, it can be rather flimsy. And that means it will, with acting weight, it can shift and adjust. And I don't recommend stacking these materials. So these would live independently on shelves and cannot be stacked. And just taking the time to measure out and build and fold and make sure these materials are housed, that can be rather labor intensive. So for one box, depending on the items that are being stored within the box, it can take you a minute to create the housing of the object. While this is a very viable option and a more economical option, it is a little bit more labor intensive. So that is the overview of DIY boxes. And now we have probably my favorite. I actually took a photo of my teeny tiny little banker's box, which isn't the most helpful, but we see these most often in archives and in different locations. Banker's boxes are going to be super helpful when working with documents and photographs and materials of that nature. The pros for these are their low cost. They are a standard size. They're easy to move and stackable. They are relatively acid neutral, and you can find these in a plethora of places, even just beyond the traditional archival suppliers. I have seen these at Walmart, at office warehouses, at oh my goodness, Walmart, office warehouses, so Staples and Office Depot. Hardware stores tend to have them. These are very versatile materials. The downsides for them are relatively limited. They are not lignin-free. They can be easily damaged. Water, if you put too much weight within the boxes, can cause them to rip and collapse over time. Too much weight on top of the boxes can also cause damage structurally to them, as then they are compressed and bend. And the biggest downside for me is that they can be a bug magnet because they are built with cardboard and those materials, and which typically attract things like silverfish and other little pesky guys that we don't want in our collections. So if I'm going to recommend anything for right across the board, I am going to recommend Banker's Boxes instead as a budget saver for document and photograph collections, just because they will survive. Obviously, all of these options have opportunities for, they all have specialized lifespans. So until we can, this is really highlighting like, hey, for a time I can use these and then check on these things every so often. So that way we can then pivot and buy better. Let's say a collection requires a lot more conservation work. We can use the funding for conservation work instead of spending all this money on boxes. So that way we can prioritize the needs of the collections further on. So like I said, the 4 options I'm four alternatives I'm recommending today are the metal cabinets, the plastic tubs, the DIY boxes, and bankers boxes. And then from here, I just also want to reiterate that the goal is preservation. These can be temporary, like I said, if you have other collections priorities and needs, which need to be addressed first, then these are what I would recommend to go to first. And with that, I would love to hear from you guys. What are some box alternatives that either I talked about today or that I didn't talk about today that your cultural center is currently using? Are these the common boxes that you guys tend to find, or how else might you store your materials?
Hey, Morgan.
Yeah.
I at one of my other institutions, we used to build our own boxes
Mm-hmm.
specifically for to build boxes around really fragile books.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you have like a video that will show us how to do that?
Yes, I can definitely pull that up. Give me one moment. I did save it for today. I just also meant to, oh my goodness, where did my video go? Hold on one second. Yes, I can take a moment and pull up that video for you guys and share it both here, and if we want to take the time to watch it, that is also an option.
Okay.
So just one moment. Okay, both of these videos are a little bit longer, but this first one that I have pinned in the chat, is from the um, Nash Community College in Rocky Mountain, North Carolina, and it shows their behind the scenes process of using archival cardstock to create boxes for objects that don't fit in pre-made archival boxes. And then I also have one from DAS bookbinding, which is more of what you are suggesting, Sarah, for clamshell book enclosures. And I have both of those in the chat. All right, I see some messages in the chat. Perfect. Um, yeah, using plastic boxes to send out materials on loan is really helpful because then it also protects from the damage of being shifted, right? Online for hand carried material. Yes, it is fair to say that Hollinger boxes are still the gold standard for preservation. They will last longer. Like there's a reason we use them in the majority of collections institutions. This is mostly for when you are needing to stretch your budget or pivot and you're having to make a decision between like, do I spend the money on these Hollinger boxes right now, or do I need, or can I wait a little bit longer and utilize this money for something else? These are just options that, while are not the gold standard, will preserve your materials until you can pivot and come back to that, reaching for that gold standard. Especially banker's boxes, I will say they are super helpful, especially while you're physically processing. They serve as really nice temporary boxes as well.
Hi, Morgan. I had a question. If
Yeah,
that's
go
okay.
for it.
Thank you, by the way, for going through all these with us. I was wondering with Banker's Boxes, is there a way that we could somehow make them less of a meal for bugs to make them more long lasting? Like, is there some kind of, I don't know, chemical or something, some kind of like covering with paper to make them longer? I don't know. Does that make sense?
I currently don't know of a super easy solution for making them less prone to bug damage. I would say making sure that they're off the floor and on metal shelving is super helpful, just because that causes more of a interference, so to speak. I would be more than willing to do some more research and add and send you some resources that might be helpful, if I can find them, for how to prolong the life of a banker's box. But yeah, keeping them off the floor. I would be really hesitant to add chemicals to the box or preventative treatments that way, just because the cardboard will then eat away at itself with any chemical application. And that would put the box at risk.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of other alternatives. Otherwise, it would be more proactive pest management, which I also have. We did a quick tips on a month or two ago. And they are all linked through the Wyoming State Archives website and also on the WRAP website, about tips for pest management. But Jamie, if you want me to, I will be more than happy to look up some resources and attach those and send them, so that way we can then all know and benefit from that. So
Oh, it'd be interesting. I mean, I think the
yeah.
the positive side about Banker's Box is honestly the shape. So, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a museum,
Yeah.
a lot of the archival boxes, we use for archives are great for the
Mm-hmm.
paper. We do the Hollinger. Um, but when it comes to objects, because we mostly have objects, I use Banker's Boxes quite a bit. And what
Mm-hmm.
I found, sadly, is like bugs inside of the boxes, but the boxes aren't
Mm-hmm.
ruined. So that's the interesting
Yeah.
part. They skipped the main meal of
Yeah.
cardboard. So
Yeah. And they're crawling
I don't
in
know.
through those openings, right? Where did my little example go? So like where the handles are, they're
Mhm.
choosing to go through there, or just some of the creases of them. Um,
And they're long dead. Let
yeah,
me say that. Like these have boxes have not been opened for a very long time, so it's
yeah.
just, you know,
Okay. So it's a natural
it's,
thing. It's not like you're getting new boxes and then okay.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, if you want, in that case, Sorry, my brain is now like doing 12 things at once. And I'm like,
No, it's
okay, we
okay.
could schedule
You're
a meeting.
the
And
expert. I'm like, I'll take this opportunity to ask.
yeah, well, so my gut reaction was like, well, if you try to use tape, that's also a bug magnet, right? Because they like to eat the chemical reaction. I would probably, unfortunately, I would recommend rehousing the materials that are in them. But that doesn't necessarily negate the problem. Trying to find more solutions. Interesting. Okay. Does anybody else have this issue? Surely, because I know I've definitely seen some bankers boxes that have pests inside them, but there is no clear way of how they've eaten through it or have gotten inside. I would recommend that, like I said, with the openings, if I know a lot of them have the flap, I would push the flap back down to help prevent that. But like I said, I am more than willing to find some resources and share them with all of you on how to improve the longevity of our bankers boxes. Yeah. Sorry that didn't directly answer your question, but I will do a little bit more research and share some more information.
No, you're good. Thank you.
Of course. Oh, Jamie, sorry. Are you also using foam in these boxes with these materials to like keep them in place?
The ones that I've pulled out that have the bug issue don't have any foam.
Okay.
What is how is foam connected? Like, what's your
Well,
recommendation?
so I was
foam?
thinking if they were, because there are some museum and archival quality foam that help keep materials in place, but that would also create a buffer to the material itself. And while that's not a super clean way of doing it, that might be an option. I'd have to look more into it though. So
you were talking earlier about as well the DIY boxes.
yes.
I'm not sure where we got this material, but it is archival material. And it's, like you said, the box, nothing's in it right now, but it doesn't remain folded. Right.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, so I was kind of, ideating, well, could I put some foam right into the slots to hold the slots down without it hurting the integrity of the archival, process? But if it's archival foam, then it should be able to hold the box together.
And there are some forms of archival tape which you could use for the box itself. I actually see it in my head. Yeah, it's acid-free tape that you can use that might help keep the structure of the box. Hold on one second. Yeah, no, that's not what I wanted. This is probably going to be the closest quick find of archival tape that I have. And that would probably help keep those boxes in place. So.
My other thought with it was, so I've used this on clothing, right? Like you write the zipper down and attach. If you wrapped it around and tied it, would that count as archival integrity? Like, I'm trying to think of things I already have, right?
Yeah,
like,
I think that would definitely work. I would test your theory. So take one box with that you DIY'd and try it. I would worry about, I'm going to presume that this is an object that probably won't be accessed as much. But that would probably help create some structure to the box. So It's not going to be the prettiest, but if it'll work, that's what we want to use, right?
It's like homemade mac and cheese. It doesn't have to look pretty. It just has to taste good.
Exactly. And anything with cheese, it's going to be fantastic. So
put some cheddar in there and we'll make it work. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. So we'll figure it out. Perfect. Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions?
Hi, Morgan.
Hey.
Mine's mostly around because I have the physical side. It's the paper. How to archive the,
Yeah.
Especially since folders and stuff won't work, and then we have like photographs that ain't protected. What exactly would you use for stuff like that? And we also have it's kind of hard to show. I'm so ashamed of this archives.
No, we all have oh my gosh, I lost my wording for it. There is no shame. We don't always do everything to the gold standard anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are you talking about larger documents that you have?
Yes.
And I know you also have some rolled papers that we've talked about.
Yes. Oh, I have a fun one to show you that I found too.
Oh, okay, we'll start there. Because with the cardstock, you can also buy thinner cardstock and create custom folders.
Yeah.
Which that is probably what I'll recommend for you. For a lot of your oversized, like I know you have a lot of posters, you have a lot of large documents and that kind of thing. Getting that cardstock, which it's still relatively similar price to the board, so about $3 per sheet, but then you can customize the sheet to your document.
Yeah.
So you would just take some measurements of documents that you have similar sizes of and see if there's one size that you can then condense down or like combine two and make bigger. I've seen it both ways. But what project do you have today?
Well, I have this wonderful little guy. I shouldn't say little guy. He has no protection at all on him.
Right.
And he's nailed in.
Oh.
To the portraits or the frame. So I'm like, oh, okay. And it looks like there's fly poop on it. Those disgusting little spots.
Yeah.
He's not protected. He's torn.
Gotcha. Yeah. For him, I would recommend a custom box because he is framed and it's going to be, if you're looking at the frame, are the metal or the nails rusting?
No, they're actually still in very good condition.
Okay. Yeah. I would recommend, I know you also have unbuffered tissue paper, right?
Yes, we do.
For right now, I would wrap him. And then another, for fun, one of my favorite conservation tools are the dry sponges. I don't have a good one physically with me right now. Where are you? Oh, I can show you guys what I'm looking at. The joys of being the person in charge of the meeting, right? We're going to look at, okay, so when you go to my website, this is the Roving Archivist website, right? Everybody can see it. Awesome. We're going to go to resources, and then I have resources on storage and supplies. We have a quick tips on here, and then I have made these nifty little supply lists and shopping lists. So I'm going to refer to the shopping list where I have some dry sponges. And it looks like they're about $3 a sponge, and then you can further cut them down. I'm going to take you to the page that I have open. So this is what the dry sponge looks like. These are really, really nice for cleaning dust and dirt. And it's really just a gentle cleaning of the object. So to try to get that fly debris off, I would try this first and utilize this tool first, just to see if it'll come off that way. If not, let me know and we'll find a different tool.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And you said cardstock,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Man, I wish I'm gonna bookmark all of these next and then make them all available through the wrap website.
Sweet.
So I
need a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can also, Sierra, since I have your email ready to go, I can email you the cardstock that I'm thinking of, and that way you have it. So
yeah, that works, because
awesome.
This stuff needs to be flat and it's curving, and I'm just like,
yeah,
stop.
And then I know Susie and I talked with you about rehydrating materials. I can also, did I send you a video on that already?
I don't think you did, but I did email Susie, and she did send me also materials to make that chamber.
Cool.
So I did forward that to my boss, that is something we want to do, especially for those panorama photos.
Yes.
I really should ask her. Nah, I'll save that for later.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, rehydrating is just a flattening technique where you apply minimal amounts of moisture to a document for 24 hours or less, depending on the size of your document, or more, depending on the size of your document. And then you place the document within blotter paper and press it down and flatten it for another day. So it's like a 2-day preservation conservation process. So yeah. Any other questions? Or comments or concerns or experiences? Open floor here. Oh, of course. And then I should let you all know our next meeting will actually be in 2 weeks on the, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting my days. On the 5th, we will have a informal discussion with oh my gosh, I forgot Jesse's last name, Jessie Keel, from the NEDCC, and she is going to talk to us about some resources and materials that the NEDCC has for disaster planning and emergency preparedness. And that'll be a more forum conversation style for all of us with a short presentation. But that will be on the 5th of March. We just had some scheduling changes. So also, if you have a moment, I would really appreciate it if if you have already, thank you. If not, I would appreciate it if you guys took our quick tips survey. This just gives me information about how this program is serving you and if it's working and what needs to be changed if it's not working. This is an anonymous form, so please feel free to be honest in it. And I just really want to build this program up for you guys and make sure I'm meeting the needs that you guys have. So thank you all for listening today. I really appreciated this and all of the questions and discussions. And like I said, I'm going to make a note to myself right now to find materials on baker's boxes and on DIY folders for some of you. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I'm going to stay on for an extra few minutes. I'm just going to go ahead and stop the recording here. So thanks.